One of the critical areas that Mike for Spokane keeps track of is crime, law enforcement, crime, primarily property crimes and white-collar crime. Serious, more violent crimes like murder and that is, that's not really our area. We don't look at that quite as much because we don't have a law enforcement background. It's, we want the best with the training to pursue very serious homicides, murders, things that are, violent crimes, rapes. We want that, our best law enforcement on that. Property crimes, though, and I'll get to white-collar crime in a minute. Property crime is something that all of us should be taking an interest in. That's kind of our responsibility. Law enforcement, in any municipality or any government, they're not, the rank and file law enforcement is not really responsible for our security. They're there to aid in it. They help where they can, but our security is our responsibility. Every individual has to pay attention to their property. Every individual has to pay attention to what their family does. Everybody has to take responsibility for their own safety and security. The best way to do that is to have good relationships with your neighbors and your neighborhood communities. One of the areas that the city of Spokane has fallen down on is property crimes and car thefts. And these, they're not really armed robbery. They're not at that violent level, but it's pervasive in Spokane. We led the nation, or we're one of the most highest incident of car thefts was here in Spokane. We've had a problem with graffiti, and we've had property crimes to the point where the Spokane Police Department doesn't even take reports anymore, or didn't. I don't know the status of last year or two, but it's been an issue in my campaigns in the past, is that we just can't get to all of the property crimes that happen in our community. I think we have the digital resources and the social media tools that collectively as individuals we can compile this information and do a lot to reduce the amount of crime in our community. One of the areas that I think, or one of the examples of good local community involvement, is the Comstock neighborhood in South Spokane. There's a group or somebody there is keeping track of property crimes in their neighborhood, and they're alerting their other neighbors who are part of this. I think it's Comstock Next Door. It's some general platform, digital platform, to share information, and you can create these communities, and someone thinking for their Comstock neighborhood set up one for their neighborhood. And when they hear about prowlers and carjackings and people breaking and entering, and there's a lot of that going on, they alert the people in that community. Those kind of tools are cheap. They're available. They're effective. We can stomp out a lot of property crime, but we can't just expect our limited law enforcement to spend all their time running down stolen bicycles or damaged cars or prowlers and that sort of thing. Some of that we have to take on ourselves. When we catch them in the act, of course we're going to call the police. I'm not looking for citizens to be interacting or stopping crime. I don't want anybody to get hurt here. We have law enforcement that can project force when necessary. But it's an information game here, really. It's like if you know what's going on in your neighborhood with digital cameras, with remote technology, with video, if we really want to put a stop to car thefts in this area, or break-ins, or a lot of this is just kids, but high school kids or college-age kids that got too much time on their hand and they have to get into trouble. We can catch those people. We can get them on camera, we can run them down, we can have a word with them and their parents. That'll stop worse crime, because if you go unimpeded, they get bolder and bolder, and next thing you know, they're in some pretty serious stuff, and lives could be altered negatively for a long time. So taking an interest in our community and having an interaction where the citizens have a relationship with law enforcement, but they're also able to take responsibility for their immediate area and work with their neighbors to find out, okay, who is doing these car thefts and where are they from and how do we get them on camera? How do we find them? And more importantly, where do we keep this information? If a citizen is robbed, their car gets broken into, and they want to file a police report and they can't do it, well, that's information that could be useful on down the line. If they're not worried about their privacy, and if you're broken in or somebody steals your stereo, you're not so much worried about your privacy so much, you'd like to get your stereo back. And you want a lot of people to know that this is going on because you typically don't want this stuff to occur unless you're a criminal. Most of us, hopefully, are not criminals. So they will willfully share this information. So what we could do in Spokane here is just have an open source a platform for people to file police reports and make it accessible to law enforcement detectives when they are searching for a certain pattern. But let's not burden them with filling out these petty little reports that, a lot of times they're not going anywhere. It's just, neighborhood vandals. It's just kids growing up. And we can take an active role in more of that and not burden our police force, but that information can be available to us community-wide. So on the subject of crime, Mike for Spokane, or myself as mayor, I'm going to enhance this, pushing it down, getting the citizens involved, sharing this information, and then allocating resources where we need to so that we can see a marked reversal in the amount of property crimes in Spokane. A big issue, and one that flies under another issue, and a very big issue in my mind, is white-collar crime. Now, a few years ago, the prosecutor's race, there was 3 candidates for prosecutor, and I asked them about white-collar crime in Spokane. And they pretty much all said there is no white-collar crime in Spokane. That's ridiculous. Forbes magazine has written 2-3 articles at least called Scam Capital of America. If you go to Forbes.com and you search Scam Capital of America, up comes Spokane, and there's several instances of white-collar crime that happens in this community. We need to have some kind of enforcement or some kind of, we need to let people know on record that if you are engaged in fraud or you're manipulating city resources, or if you're doing conduct that would be considered criminal, and a lot of this is, has to do with accounting and finance and transparency, but there are consequences for cheating your neighbors, cheating the citizens of Spokane, whether that be using government to do it or just out and out defrauding your neighbor. We need some white-collar crime enforcement. A lot of that is done with accountants, people who understand finance, but an emphasis in my campaign, and if I'm to be your mayor of the city of Spokane, an emphasis on white-collar crime will be very much front and center in my administration. It is important. It is why we elect people. We elect people to protect the sovereign interests of the individual citizens. And if they're stealing or damaging the citizens, whether it be property crimes, physically stealing stuff, or they do it because they're getting into your identity theft, or they're getting into your checking accounts, or they're promising you something and they're, we all know how thieves can operate. They get your credit cards. This white-collar crime, which is so hard to enforce, I want to put some teeth in it. I want to grab some of these guys, and I want people to understand that if they're engaged in white-collar crime in Spokane, there's a high probability that Mike for Spokane will come looking for them. And with your help, I think we can catch some of these guys. We can slow the property crime down. We can slow the white-collar crime down. If we can do that, we're going to more likely attract investments. We're more likely to have people come here and raise their families and, enrich our community. But nobody wants to come here and be a sucker. And a lot of times that's what it is. People get their stuff stolen and they've got no recourse. And Mike for Spokane wants to change that, and I appreciate your help in doing so.